Okay, we're ready to go?
Sounds good.
All right. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our workshop, Growing Community Resilience, Even Without a Green Thumb. It's a perfect day, at least here in New York, for this lovely spring weather that things are growing. My name is Susie McCormack, and I work with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County. Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County, along with our partners, Cornell Cooperative Extension in Delaware County, have organized this series of workshops focused on building community resilience. The series is made possible with the support from the Delaware County Rural Healthcare Alliance and the ACES Task Force in Delaware County. This is the fourth workshop in the series, with one remaining next month in May. It's going to be on May 12th. And however, we're already making plans for a whole new series over the summer. So we are glad that many of you continue to attend a lot of workshops with us, and we really are looking forward to continue to learn with you. I want to remind you all that these workshops are recorded and they're available for you to go back and watch and share with whoever you think might benefit from them as well. All the recordings can be found on the CCE Delaware website. So today we are warmly welcoming Terry Barilla as our presenter. And I'm personally so excited for this workshop because I have already learned a lot from the work that Terry does. Terry is the founder and board president emeritus of the Community Resilience Initiative, CRI, based in Walla Walla, Washington. CRI's mission supports three pillars: training, community engagement, and resilience building product development. Terry earned her bachelor's degree in biology at American University and a master's of science in fisheries management from University of Maryland, and spent 20 years as a research biologist with the Federal Salmon and Steelhead Recovery Program in the Pacific Northwest. Her experience in that field helped her bridge science and practice when she changed careers and moved into community engagement work 22 years ago. Recognized internationally for her work with CRI, Terry trains core teams to develop their own blueprints so that resilience trumps ACEs. Terry is involved extensively in training, consulting, writing, and researching in trauma, resilience, and community capacity building. Her work has attracted attention from various venues, in part due to the focus Terry places on grassroots organizational development and focus on the hope of resilience. Terry is a mom of two children, a son and a daughter, and was pleased to add the title of grandmother in 2018. Experiencing a special needs child's world has significantly shaped Terry's thinking on systems, education, resilience, and advocacy for children. Terry enjoys anything to do with out of doors and sunshine and blue sky in her spare time. Today, Terry will share lessons learned on her journey of creating the first community-wide initiative focused on resilience. She will share key points in the principles of organizing your own blueprint for growing resilience at a community level. I'm sure we will all learn a lot from Terry today. We're going to hold questions if you put them in the chat, and we'll hold them to the end, and we hope we can get to them. And I just wanted to remind you that we'll be doing a survey at the end of this workshop as well. So if you want teacher credits, that you would do the survey in order to get those. So Terry, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. And Susie, could you give me a 5-minute notice? I don't see a clock in my room somehow, so thanks.
Absolutely will.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'd like to just take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that I am on the traditional land of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, including the Cayuse, the Walla Walla, and the Umatilla peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Their stewardship was based on their belief that water was created first, life and land were created next. Land promised to take care of all life, and all life promised to take care of the land. I attest, affirm, and acknowledge our responsibility to do the same based on the legacy that the tribes left for us to carry on. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the warm welcome, even though we had snow this morning, and my garden is in a state of shock. So I am excited to talk about community-based resilience because that is what my passion focused on from the time I first came to understand the amazing original study on the adverse childhood experiences. So just real quick, wanted to mention, born and raised in DC, that's Walter Reed Army Medical Center. That was basically our home. My dad was an anesthesiologist and researched there. And We lived in that pond more than we lived in our home, actually, with my large family and siblings. But as Susie mentioned, I did go into fishery science, and yeah, that's why I keep a salmon still trying to swim upstream there on my wall. Learned a ton of stuff about why we need to pay attention to these beautiful fish that we recognize as indicator species. And I see each of you in this workshop today as an indicator species, which means we have to be aware of the impact of our practices, both in the community and in the environment, culturally, spiritually, emotionally, because we act as that impetus for change and for a better quality of life for our children and our grandchildren. So yeah, I've been at this particular work with community for 22 years now, following that work with the salmon and steelhead, and try to share that systems thinking and why, when we understand the patterns and the patterns that lead to behaviors, we then understand what's going on in our lives. And yep, 2 kids, 1 son, 1 daughter, and nobody told me I'd have this much fun with a granddaughter, but what a blast. She is everything amazing. All right, now it might be weird to start with myths, but I often find that if we focus on what is not correct, we can really jump into where we truly are with the science of resilience. So you can glance through that list on your own, but truly it is not a characteristic that you either have or you don't. And it's not something that's only found in good homes. Or as one parent said to me, well, I thought that would just show up in my son at a certain point. So it's a lot, just as you glance through that, these are not what resilience is, which is good, because these would be very limiting and very biased towards certain beliefs and systems that we don't support. Instead, what I wanted to emphasize is that over the time of the research going on in the resilience world, it shifted from something of a deficit-based to a strength-based model. And again, in that first wave, it was believed to be like an internal characteristic that you had or didn't have. But as more and more research was done, it became very aware that it's not just a trait. It is so based on the interaction of that individual within the influence of the environment and the culture and the belief systems in which that individual lives. And finally, the fourth wave that we're currently in is that it's capacity driven. And I think that's really important, that word capacity, because like any other application of the word capacity, it has to be grown and nurtured, developed. You have to be aware of it to then be able to grow it and nurture it. And it's primarily based on what we as adults do and show our kids. So keep that in mind. We'll be coming back to it. And so that I hope would be the model you have in mind for this conversation today. It's about the context in which we each live. And that's what makes it somewhat challenging, because my context is quite different. Growing up in DC and experiencing the race riots in Vietnam and seeing all of the young men in Walter Reed with missing limbs. And I mean, I was so shaped by the context of growing up in DC during a momentous time in our lives. That context gave me deep values and beliefs that shaped everything I've done since then. I wasn't aware of that, but that context is what we want to talk about. And it's the context that comes from the community and from the exposure to the lived community. So I wanted you to make sure you understood what I mean by that context in community. And so it's so much bigger than just your own immediate family. And while the original ACE study was monumental and seminal in getting us started on the understanding of trauma and the lifespan, Now we know that so much more plays into that development than just the family environment, because none of us just live in the family environment. All right, well, what is the actual definition? I'll let you read the typical ones, but for me, I've always thought of it as a verb. And I never found anybody, well, I shouldn't say never found anybody, but I didn't find research that considered resilience as a verb. And then not too long ago, I stumbled on a blog post by Andrew Zolli. It's in the corner of the slide there. And his title was The Verbs of Resilience. And I thought, oh my gosh, I finally found somebody that considers the word resilience to be a verb, which of course I know it's not. And so that's a paper or a post you may want to look up. And then the recent article by McEwen, I think, is extremely helpful because he connects all of the research around our social environments and how it's the social aspect that helps us to face the ramifications of adversity. And one of my favorite flowers is the amaryllis here. And I just think the way that flower blossoms is an image of how using the word resilience as a verb can blossom, because this is from Andrew Zolli's paper, by the way. He talks about how we build that capacity, how we learn to sense when we're seeing risk coming in, how we respond to those disruptions. I mean, think about COVID at the moment. And then how we critically learn and then transform based on that. And to me, again, those are the types of actions that happen when you think about resilience at the community level. When you learn to look, to identify, you see the words down there, to cultivate, to practice, model, teach, and celebrate, because all of those help develop resilience. It's not something from a textbook or from a cookbook. We do this in our day-to-day practice of living. All right, well, what does that mean at the community level? Well, the word adaptive, we adapt, just like the salmon and the steelhead in our whole history of adaptation. It's not survival of the fittest, it's who adapts the best. And I found this quote is one of my favorites. I go back to it all the time. Our brain is a social organ of adaptation. It's a black box up there in our skull case. It doesn't know anything other than what input comes into it from our sensory, our motion, our whole environment. And that's how we learn. And we primarily learn through the relationships that we develop in our lives across all social domains. So the brain actually needs to learn and to heal within the context of community. And while individual resilience is, of course, extremely important, and every child deserves that training and that exposure to build that capacity, individual resilience on its own is not sustainable if that collective community resilience is not there. And I'll show you some data on that. And it's because resilience does not develop in isolation. You don't sit here and hope to be resilient. You're in community as you learn what those contexts are. So a lot of the findings from our work here and elsewhere is an understanding that there will always be risk. But the more we buffer those risk factors with protective factors, and I call resilience a short title for protective factors, the more likely it is that we'll be able to address the social inequalities and all of the issues that we struggle with, because we understand for risk there's protection, and we have to build on the protective factor side at the community level. So how do you do that? Well, in Walla Walla, we've always talked about it as building that language. It's just like your native language. If you don't have vocabulary, how can you speak the language? And this work comes from Dr. Edith Grothberg, who did a major international research project on resilience across all countries. And she came down, or she reduced it to, and for teachers in the audience, this is brilliant to me, that you can take the whole resilience research frame and get it down to 3 statements: I am, I have, and I can. And my research colleague in sociology and statistics helped me work with those 3 statements to where we brought our work into that. And the I am is around those internal personal strengths and the capacity to develop those. The I have represents that basic human need for safety and security, to have those people supporting you. And then I can reflects on that sense of mastery of skills, and then a sense of the future with hope and optimism based on how to plan for those goals. And in our work and in other leading research, you'll find 4 major themes on that. It's about the relationships, the mastery of skills, and that's the critical piece, because not all kids get exposed to equal access for that mastery. It's about optimism, but not in that kind of esoteric or spiritual or even meditation type of optimism. I mean optimism because you have the agency and the tools and the resources to make it happen. And then that purpose, the sense of belonging, that commitment that you know you belong and you have a place in this world. So those are 4 themes that are very prominent in the work and in what I've seen in the 22 years of work here. So this is how we tie individual and community together. Yes, we need that individual resilience. I created that 52 deck of cards. 42 are resilience cards, 10 are the original ACEs, but it was because I want kids and adults to go from perhaps lack of access to those strategies to where they can say, I am trusting, I am helpful, I can manage, the I am and the I can, because they are within that contextual resilience of their community and their key relationships that say we are and we can, and we go out of our way to help each other. And we ultimately act for the common good, because that's the we of the I, and that's how we go from the I to the we. We are because I am, and I am can develop because we are. So the puzzle image, I think, is just a really good one to try to express that and show that. This was how we did it for one of our conferences, to show that every sector, and we could have even added more, but our little puzzle piece that we were working with accommodated 14. But every sector and every individual, go back to that indicator species concept, every one of us attempting to bring this forward has a piece of that puzzle. And without that piece, the puzzle will be incomplete. And I wanted to emphasize the adult role, because it really comes to the adults to help model and lead that for the child, because children learn resilience by watching it in front of them. And that's primarily starts with adults' ability to stay regulated or not. Because when we understand the brain science, the simple brain science behind our nervous system, and how we're triggered to either sense fear or safety. And if it's fear, the cascade of hormones and chemicals that come into play through that whole HPA system to protect us, that is critical in how children watch how we as adults manage our day-to-day ups and downs. And there's 2 major characteristics in that community resilience from the national literature. It's the social cohesion, which just means the strength of relationships and how we come together as a community. And then the fancy word collective efficacy, which just means trust. Can we come together to create those opportunities and access for all, to where we can share the norms and the values that are reflective of the demographics of our community and where we're trying to head. And here's the data that my colleague, Dr. Dario Longhi, and several of these papers are on our website if any of you wanted to dig in deeper. But he studied 118 communities in the state of Washington and was looking for specific characteristics and data to come up with that pool of 118 communities. But from that, he found that when a community is focused on building that community resilience, the magnitude of that impact of resilience can moderate negative risk impacts from adversity by the data that you see here. The A stands for the adult, Y stands for youth. So with better mental health, we can improve adults' ability to thrive by a whopping 28%. Look at some of these numbers. Higher work participation in adults, 13% improvement when they understand the principles of resilience and see it reflected in the workforce. Higher school performance, 39% for kids. We have new data coming out of our core study site here in Walla Walla that takes that even further and shows the particular elements of resilience that makes the biggest impact, and then how that carries on after high school graduation. But the most important part to me in this data is that the resilience impact was independent of ACEs, poverty, or race, meaning it had that higher statistical confidence with it in terms of what you need to worry about with statistics. So this is pretty amazing and supports why community building resilience is so critical. And there's 2 nationally published journals, or our data here is now published in 2 different national journals. I've noted in the bottom of the slide, but again, it's on our website under resource. And we know it works. When youth see adults engaged, doing what they say, and youth feel supported across all domains, not just in school, but anywhere that youth travels in his or her daily life, that's when resilience starts to bloom. And when adults rely on each other through that mutual help and support, and to the extent that actually caring for others' children when needed, these are the core principles of community resilience right here. And this work was picked up by the New York Times. And David Brooks did a 4-part series on this work. So that's another resource you might want to look at. Well, here's an important link. And for those of you who were on the first of these, this series, Rick Griffin is our training director. He spent a chunk of that time with you on the predicting brain. That's the newest way of thinking about how our brain handles sensory input. And it's the understanding of that neurological threat response that I mentioned earlier. That brain, which again, it or she or whatever we would call it, can't see anything. It's like that black box in the airplane. Yet the prediction of every moment of every day since you've been conceived helps it, like a statistician almost, to say, oh, we're in trouble. This is heading us down that threat track. Or, hey, don't worry about that. It's okay, we're safe. So it's understanding how that threat response is recognized in that black box. And this is where it gets complicated, the variation in human experience that creates the different context. And let's use the police department for a real quick example there, so I don't lose you on that point. I call the police anytime I need them because I trust them. I've learned that they're helpful, and I've never been shot to death by a police officer. Someone else who doesn't look like me may not have that same human experience that police are people that you can trust, and they'll help you, and they would never voluntarily call the police. So that's the variation in human experience that shapes that internal processing of our brain to think threat or safety. And it's not straightforward, and that's where we get in trouble, because I assume everybody's going to think of the police department the way I learned to think of them. And that's not true. That does not take in the variation in human experience. So that's a seed to plant there if you've never thought of it that way. And what is the brain's goal in this whole prediction process? It's to retain balance. We need to stay balanced to maintain our body budget. So that homeostasis, the fancy word for balance, is why the brain has to be so good at predicting what it thinks is coming in through our sensory input, because a threat is going to be viewed as a disturbance and we're going to go into trauma, whereas a perception of safety will keep us in homeostasis, which is the balance, and we're not expending energy on responding to the threat response. We're using that same energy perhaps to digest our meal or to expand our cognitive thinking or to be attentive in the classroom. So this is a critical slide here. And I want everyone to understand the power of that predicting brain. Now, the problem is, if we were raised, like in my family, we were raised to understand that if my dad came home and he had been drinking, we would better be ready to hide the car keys, unplug the landline in the day, look to where he hid his bottles and hunker down and try to stay out of his way until he went through his binge drinking and then went back to being the most amazing dad you'd ever hope in the world. It just unfortunately got interrupted quite a bit by alcoholism. That is a great example of where we were constantly learning to recognize, is this going to be a threat or is this individual going to be our safety? And that's why CRI has attempted to expand the concept of ACEs beyond that initial ACE study, which focused on the impact in the time you're in that family home. But what about all of the other social domains that we are influenced by? The big one right now, the catastrophic events of climate change and the pandemic. What about the day-to-day community environment impact of whatever ism you want to throw out there, but certainly the race issues and the other issues you see on that slide. Our cultural exposures. Oh, sorry, I meant to say the cultural exposure on racism. And then my favorite, in a way, because I'm 71 now. I have spent 71 years learning about adverse circuitry expression in my daughter's situation of both Asperger's and epilepsy. And I have come to truly value and appreciate the understanding of that neurology and our whole threat and safety response cycle because of what she has taught me in her 32 years of dealing with Asperger's and epilepsy. So all of this is what creates us. And those were all based on that threat, resilience, and here's some examples from our deck of cards. The safety side of that, the homeostasis side, that sense of belonging, which is so incredibly important to our kids and to us adults too, but the attachment to a caring adult, feeling connected to your community and giving back. These are my top 5 favorites, but all 42 are so important in helping us to learn to find that homeostasis and balance when our lives are disrupted. And that is the safety that keeps us then calm and regulated. So the gardening analogy that I referred to in my little blurb, well, that's the predictive brain trying to understand the collective experience in the community. And much like a garden, this is my own garden. Right now it's under snow this morning, but on the left side, that's what it looked like about a month ago. That's the dead of winter garden. You know, you just let it sit there. And So what was I doing before the snow? I was rototilling. I was adding the supplements that I add. I was doing everything you do to get it ready for spring. This is last year's pictures on the other two, but sure enough, when you pay attention to the soil, when you do the right things, when you understand that corn maybe needs something a little bit different than the blueberries back there, you would pay attention to the environment and what creates that environment. You don't just throw the seeds out there and come back in 85 days and pick your corn, right? Well, think of that example again about indicator species. Every community member can be that gardener that thinks about what you can do this very moment to improve the soil, so to speak, of your community, your family, whatever your community basis is. And as I've tried to highlight, community does cultivate resilience when it's built into the practices. It starts with that individual commitment and that daily practice. In my mind, it's about using it as a verb, because that way you do it every single day. You're verbing resilience every moment. It's never built in isolation. And a large part of it is built on witnessing the stories that people share with you. I was just being interviewed. Our conference is coming up in June, and somebody's writing little blurbs for the sessions. And I was supposed to tell her about mine. And before I noticed it, everything was about stories. And it was like in this 30-minute interview kind of a thing. It was all about the stories. And she said, you know, forget the session, just tell your stories. Those stories are so amazing. I want to learn everything just based on the stories. So it's witnessing the stories and learning and valuing and supporting and saying that I see where you've been. And we call it what's in your backpack. And I've tried to kind of quickly reference this in my story about growing up in DC. My backpack was stuffed. And again, this is all unconscious. You don't even know what's in your backpack most of the time, unless you've gone through this kind of work to where you try to unpack it and find out what triggers you and why. You may know what triggers you, but why? Why does one thing trigger you, but not another? Think that's where you have to unpack your backpack. And I came to realize how critical everything I've been trying to summarize for you quickly was in shaping those things that made the difference to me and were important to me, and that I felt would help me work in community. And it's based on, this is a quote from the African American National Museum in DC that opened up a couple years ago. And I went to finally, it wasn't there when I was growing up in DC. And I was blown away by the impact of that museum on my thinking and on the resilience of the African Americans' story from the time they were brought as slaves. And this quote in particular, I think, is so important. It's the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, unconsciously controlled by it. And until you learn what has controlled your patterns, you won't be able to live the best life you can and truly thrive. And so again, think about unpacking that backpack. What does that mean in building a movement? When we become aware of the biases, the traits, the values, the just how we look at the world, that example of the police real quick. And we had a young man live with us for 5 years as he was moving through the community college and then nursing. And he was born in Mexico, came to the US. He later became a US citizen, but oftentimes he'd be in the car with my daughter and I, and he'd say, oh, Miss Terry, and I love that he always called me Miss Terry. Oh, Miss Terry, if I was driving right now, I'd be pulled over and they'd be asking for my green card and never believe that I was a US citizen. And I say, for that, I mean, one time I just made a turn a little bit too big and ended up in the left lane. And oh yeah, I've been pulled over. I mean, how many times he would tell me how he was targeted because of what he looked like. You don't understand that if you haven't lived that. And we have to learn about what and how we've been imprinted to then be more conscious of how our biases can unfortunately hurt another or be a blinder to us as we're trying to work in a diverse community. So dig into that backpack. I'm spacing the woman's name. I'm sorry right now. I want to say her first name was Pamela, but she wrote that stunning article about, I don't know, 27 ways to know. I'll find it and send to you guys, but like, when was the last time you tried to find black colored Band-Aids in the Band-Aid store? And yet as a white person, have you even stopped to think, wow, I wonder if I were black, if I'd want more of a brown or black colored Band-Aid to blend in. Little things like that that you just don't even know to think about. And a lot of that, back to the adult regulation that I just ended on that slide without calling out again, adult regulation is what's so critical in all of this. And one of my colleagues who works up at the Penn and works with inmates using our materials, he came up with this statement because he realized his 10 ACE history, and he shares his wife's 0 ACE history. He was so often his wife's chaos rather than his wife's calm to his wife. And, it changed his marriage, he tells us, and says it in his own trainings, when he recognized it was all about learning to recognize those triggers and then to be able to manage those. And so the Q-tip, we pass out Q-tips at our trainings, quit taking it personally, because so much of that really starts with you feeling that you've been stepped on, when perhaps based on your own imprinting, you can't recognize that you just stepped on someone else, or you're just honestly taking their comments or their expression the wrong way, and you need to ask for clarification. But that Q-tip is a big part of learning that self-regulation. So protective factors. We've got the risk factors, the multiple versions of ACEs, and those 5 categories aren't all of them, but those risk factors, always we're wanting to buffer with protective factors. And for those of you on the webinar with us today, many of you from extreme risk situations, and yet you found the courage and the strength, perhaps through one special mentoring relationship or whatever, and you have found your way to move through this. So it's always that pairing of risk and protection. The third bullet there, the loss can never be fully appreciated and valued if not for the love and beauty. And we heal, we truly move to healing when we can understand our history in a way that helps us move forward and doesn't keep us trapped. And that's why we have to change those patterns, because for many, many years, for me, and I came to learn this through all of this ACE work, I was still protecting myself because I still thought that dad image was going to be coming home ready to not be the best dad in the world. And until I could look at those patterns, and that's one example, but look at those patterns and start to tell my brain, I mean, I guess it's a sign of old age. You start talking out loud too. And I would say to my brain, okay, don't go there. That's not where we are. That was then. This is now. And you slowly undo where those predictive patterns want to take you. And think of that predictive brain. You don't always need to react or respond the way you did when you were 5 years old. In fact, if you still respond like you did at 5, you're not thriving and you're not maximizing your potential. So it's not the ACE score that matters, it's the resilience score that matters. And while the ACE study clearly is instrumental in our understanding of trauma and later health, physical, mental, and emotional health, what we now know that even a high ACE score like my friend Tony that I was telling you about, with support, with awareness, with consciousness, he is in much better shape today than someone that may have a low ACE score, but did not have the insights and the strategies and the awareness and the consciousness. And that individual may not be as healthy. So it's your resilience score based within that context of the social supports within your world that really is what you want to be keeping account of, not the ACEs. And it grows in community as we work with our kids, as we help to develop those core strategies. Dr. Ginsburg went through his 7 C's. Everybody has the ones they like the best, but this is how we build that resilience at the community level. This is a banner I created because I often would hear people respond that they thought resilience had to happen like in your, almost like early childhood learning. If I don't have the resilience in the first 5 years, I'm doomed. No, that's that capacity again. Resilience is capacity, and it's across the lifespan. So from prenatal, we even now know it's even historical trauma, but at least from prenatal in this example, through even hospice care. I had a hospice nurse tell me, can you change your banner to include death? Because I have not worked with one person attempting to die that has yet totally faced the traumas to recognize that they can let go of this life. I mean, that's how significant her statement was about applying resilience through the lifespan. So again, back to the amaryllis blooming so incredibly magnificently. It's all about, in my thoughts, about witnessing the healing and helping people to heal. Because when we can recognize that, when we can recognize what trauma has done in that lived experience, we are developing that relational trust. A woman very pivotal in my thinking, and still a friend today, but she first came up to me and right in my face and said, you know, I get so angry when I hear you talk because you act as if everybody should know what resilience means. We did not have that in my family, and I don't want you talking about it without telling me what to do about it. And that was the birth of the whole educational product development, so that parents who didn't have access to this would then know what we're talking about. That's relational trust to tell me that. And, you know, I think I have 1 second to read this to you. She recently sent me, so she was a 10 ACE mom. She assumed she was just believed she was a bad parent because everybody told her she was a bad parent. She was in the system, experienced homelessness, et cetera. She sent me a thank you note. She's now created a small nonprofit based on her transformation from an ACE person to a resilience person. And she said, I just want you to know, if I read this, I might start crying. I want you to know how much you mean to me. I know I've not told you before, but you were the beginning of my life-changing decisions. You have always embraced me and my family through everything. And I wanted to thank you for believing in me and helping me see what kind of person I am. I am now alive and grateful. I know I am a powerful and kind person because of you. I don't need any more the rest of my whole entire life than this one little handwritten. And you know why she wrote it? I mean, not why she wrote it, but I said, you know, Annette, people really appreciate handwritten notes when somebody's done something for you. Well, I got one from her. Now, that's empowering community understanding of the forces that shaped that woman to where she's now got her own nonprofit and she serves homeless people now transitioning into housing. So what are some of those life signs of resilience when we talk about the verbing? I'll let you read through these 7. But the life signs of a healthy community, the continuation of the cycle of life represented by the adult salmon there with their nest of eggs. To me, these 7 might be considered core values for that, but what would your vision of a healed community be? In the workshop I offer, we spend 12 hours getting to what is the vision of a healed community and how would you get there? We built ours, our roadmap was built on what we call our KISS framework, based on the 22 years of this work. It's about the knowledge, having the knowledge of the sciences, but knowledge alone doesn't get you anywhere if it's not applied, right? So it's developing that insight, that what's in your backpack kind of thing, understanding what history did to you and what an individual's history may have done to them during that life experience, to put that knowledge into practice via insight. If you don't do the insight step, you can't get to strategies, because you'll still be, not you yourself, but the individual one might still be basing that knowledge on a broken system, on biases that can only re-harm and re-traumatize. Strategies, that's where the actual application and the practice comes into place around safety and connection. And then finally, building the structures, which would be the policies, the practices, the protocols, more of the administrative type of support that keeps the K, the I, and the S blooming like that amaryllis within organizations. And two columns here that I like to emphasize. The one is the SMART acronym that you may have experienced already. Having planning and strategies that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, because without that, how do you know that you're making progress? If you can't measure yourself and learn, how do you know that you're on the right track? And that came from the right column, which are the four major themes that came out of the 22 years of work, which is that laser focus that keeps you on your mission and on your goals and objectives by always expanding the leadership, meaning bringing in new people, not just the ones that you're used to inviting, but to folks that may never have been asked to come in and share their history, their stories, their vision of a community. Always that expanded learning through the SMART acronym kind of application, and then taking the time to look at the results and reflect on the results, and if needed, refocus, remeasure, retarget. So these are some key principles I have found. And for those of you who may be educators, I want an extra A+, because this is scaffolding. And my teacher sister taught me that concept of scaffolding. When we focus and then build on that leadership, the learning, the results, when we act as the indicator species in our community, doing that day-to-day work of the verbing, we create the resilience through that repetitive or the scaffolding work that teachers know so well. So I want my A+. And I mentioned 4 C's in my little introduction blurb. I have a sense of humor that sometimes gets me in trouble, but that's okay. People come to find out that they understand my sense of humor. But I thought these 4, I wrote this up once in a report to a big state agency, and they called me up and they said, oh my gosh, that's the best summary we've ever gotten, that work like ours, we as that indicator species, we act as that catalyst. We make things happen. Yes, sometimes it might erupt a little bit, but you got to make the things happen. You can't sit around and wait. So you're that catalyst, you're the convener, you bring people together. You certainly will act as a coach, because oftentimes the hardest part of this work is feeling that it's not going fast enough, or that something is wrong, or that you missed that detour sign, or that you need to refocus, or you're not seeing the result. That's okay. That's when you need that coach, and maybe even that cheerleader, because it's hard work. This is very hard work. This is a journey, not a sprint. You can't, I'll always remember we were maybe 3 years into this, and we brought in a big fancy neuroscientist out of the University of Washington. And he said, you know, this is a social reform, like the click it and ticket seatbelt thing, like breast cancer screening, colon cancer screening, and the tobacco cessation. These are 30-year social programs. And I was like deflated. We were in year 3 and I thought we'd be done by 5, because once everybody knew about ACEs and resilience, then it would just take off and we wouldn't need to keep doing it every day. You know, the ACE thing came out in what, 1995 to 1997. It may take 30 years to get it embedded to the extent that those 4 examples he gave us, but it starts by being that catalyst, convener, coach, and cheerleader. And this is a free download on our website if you want it. I made this up for COVID, or I didn't make it up. I put it together, I mean, for COVID. Nothing's made up. When we help parents or whoever the person is, but when we can get this science down into simple language, like that I am, I have, I can, that's when parents shine on this. So claim my calm. Find my safe zone. And then I tie it to all of the resilience, you know, strategies, but name my feelings, learn to express that, build those connections, know where you are on that sense of your own personal triggers. My daughter is now so used to me saying, I'm going to step out for a minute. I need some fresh air, because otherwise I'm going to say something I don't want to, you know, that type of stuff. And always share that smile, that empathy, and working as a team. That's how we make all this work, in my opinion. I have no idea what time it is. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring my phone in because I didn't want it beeping, but I was hoping we would close and then have questions, or go back and ask for detail if you want. You know, what are 3 things that you might be willing to verbalize that you would carry from today? What 2 new things did you learn that maybe you hadn't heard from anybody else? And what 1 thing would you like to know more about? And I guess I didn't explain that little logo up there is our logo that we developed. We do a big October's Resilience Awareness Month with other agencies and partners to really try to get the, I would say, for the layman on the street. And I love that little example of the milk carton stuffed full of all the resilience strategies. So if you were wondering, that's what that is. But I'm open to questions, comments, or go back and check on things that I went too fast on.
And you're doing great for time. It's 4:22.
Great. And are there chat comments I should look at? I could go up there and look if somebody wanted it.
Yeah, we just have the survey in the chat.
Okay. Wasn't sure if somebody had stuck a question up there. But is anyone willing to, oops, I think I just probably punched the wrong thing. Would anyone like to comment on that last slide, which I can go back to, I think. But I know processing, it's hard to process on the spot. I don't like that when people ask me to do it. So it's okay if you don't say anything. But if there's a teacher in the audience, I do want you to say, you're pretty cool that you knew scaffolding. But I'm happy to let you go if you just want to kind of think about all this, but you got me for 8 more minutes if you want it. Oops, sorry, I keep rolling my mouse. Take my hand off of it.
Well, Terry, I'd like to say that I like the idea of, you know, thinking about the vision of, you know, a healed community. I really like that as a way to figure out, you know, our way forward. Keep us focused, as you say, as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, they say if you don't have a goal, it's not going to happen. If you don't have a vision, it's not going to happen. What do you want your community to look like? And then not to be overwhelmed, but what can you tackle? I'll tell a real quick story if nobody else has their hand up, but I was working in a community that felt extremely isolated. They actually were up by the we have a Washington State Penitentiary, and they lived right in that area. They just felt isolated. There was no public space, no neighborhood stores, just a really bad couple of blocks stuck in an industrial zone. And so I went in there as a community organizer, and I said, well, what's your vision for your neighborhood. And it was a high proportion of Hispanic Latinos, but still probably 40% white maybe. And a Hispanic man said, oh, we don't have dreams or visions. We're not allowed to have those. And I thought, man, see, there's that perspective that was such an insightful moment for me to recognize that what seems common sense to me, of course you have a vision or a goal. Anyway, that wasn't going to be the story, but it was a big learning lesson for me. What they finally helped us understand was they wanted a place for their neighborhood kids to play. There were 5 trailer homes at the corner of one of those blocks, and they were meth labs. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a pretty big vision of replacing 5 meth labs trailers with a community park. But I thought, okay, let's see what we can do with that. And we broke it down into pieces. But within a couple years, and with some significant help from a local foundation, we were able to buy out that landlord that allowed those trailer homes to be used for that. We brought in one of the best thinkers on green space in the state of Washington because he was interested in our project. And that neighborhood community built their community park and center, and it absolutely changed that neighborhood for life because they had a place to call their own, to congregate, to come together, to celebrate. And it all started with them believing, remember that one slide I showed you, that you could have a goal, you could have optimism and hope if you have people in place that will help you get there.
Beautiful story of community coming together.
Yeah, and real quick, they actually started out by saying, we don't like the feral rabbits. Can you help us get rid of feral rabbits? I thought, holy smokes, I'm a fisheries biologist, but now you want me to help you get rid of feral rabbits? But we did that too. And that's how we built trust. And over a couple projects like that, and I had to learn how to construct rabbit traps because they didn't want to kill them. Some wanted to because they wanted the food. Anyway, from that relational trust, remember that slide? I was like, okay, if you want to, we'll work on feral rabbits. You got it. Well, we ended up with this most beautiful community park in Walla Walla. So thank you. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate
Thank you so
having
much.
Thank you, Terry.
asked me to be with you. Appreciate it. And
Thank you.
best wishes to all.
Yep.
Same to
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
I want
Bye.
to remind everybody that there's the survey in the chat and that we have an upcoming webinar on May 12th. Okay, thank you so much, Terry.
No, thank you, Susie. And
Thank you,
Karen.
Jeannie.